Hello and welcome to Podsongs, where we interview inspirational people in service to others as inspiration for a new song. Today, my guests are the musicians Firekid, Heidi and Dillon Hodges, and their guests are Lee Camp and Brad Crisler.
Hello.
Hello.
Hold on 1 second, getting the windows straight here. Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
We're floating in the abyss today.
I see that. Come down to earth for me.
We have a couple, options here. Look at this.
Well, no. No, I'm getting motion sickness. The first one.
Yeah. He likes the abyss.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you guys.
How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good.
You said it was storming, so your internet might take a hit.
It is. So if I do drop out, just carry on the show without me. I am really superfluous to this episode. It's a very unusual episode in that you contacted me. Well, I was in contact with you first to get you on the show with a guest of your choice. But in the meantime, workaholics that you are, beat me to it. And you, on another podcast, you got inspiration for another song and you went ahead and recorded it. And now you've already done it.
Yes. So we hit you up and didn't immediately, like, you didn't get responses right away or something.
Yeah.
And so in the meantime, we did get really busy, and this happened, and I was like, actually, this song is perfect for what you're doing because of how it came about, which I'm sure we can talk to the guys about when they get in here. But yeah, we're glad to be here. I'm glad it worked out, Timing.
You're my dream guests. This is,
Oh,
if everyone was like you,
Too kind.
I could do 300 episodes a year and not break a sweat.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, this is exciting because it's friends of ours. I don't know how fun the podcast is with a friend, but I think I'm pretty excited to have like a conversation about touchy topics with friends, like religion and politics and stuff like that. The things that you're not really supposed to talk about. But
let's get into that in a minute, because I've got you guys are so interesting on your own. I need 25 minutes rattling off questions for you guys. Because,
fair enough.
Yeah, you guys are dynamite, no?
Thank you.
Thanks. We keep busy.
Yeah. I think I was watching your In the Gravel Yard video, which on repeat. What a weird experience that was.
Yes. Terrifying.
Yeah. That was freaky.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
So In the Gravel Yard is like we reworked an old song and made it somewhere like folky, Radiohead sonically. But for the visualizer with the video, which is I think what you're talking about, we took public domain footage of Metropolis, which just entered, it was a German expressionist film, just entered the public domain this year. And there's a famous robot dance scene in the film where an android's on stage. She looks like a person, but she's an android. She's dancing on stage with like tassels on and stuff like that in front of an audience of men in like tuxedos and suits who were just like breathing heavily watching her dance. And so I thought it would be interesting to combine the old footage with modern technology. And so I deep faked Heidi's face over every single character in the scene.
Terrified.
And I didn't like spend a lot of time like nitpicking the deep faking. So there's artifacts, it like breaks up sometimes. And I thought that added to it.
But is the footage original? Because it also looks very sharp and very. Was the AI generated footage? It was enhanced somehow?
Yeah. So I took the AI footage, and on its own, I took the AI footage, I colorized it, and I enhanced it. And then I deep faked it, which made it look kind of crappy. And just on the back end. And on top of that, I also took the isolated vocals from our track where we're singing In the Gravel Yard and made the mouths move. So you see a whole audience of men all in unison saying the lyrics of the song as they're like breathing, watching this woman dance. Is very strange.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. But this kind of ties into, it's a random list of questions, so I'm just dropping in anyway. But
Yeah,
it does kind of tie in with that that TED talk I saw you do, where you talk about the folk process, where songs get reused. Like the Woody Guthrie song was borrowed from a borrowed found song.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's still going on today.
That's right. So that song in particular is the perfect example of it, because like Woody Guthrie's song "This Land Is Your Land" is a big deal in America, and it's sort of associated with, it's like a second national anthem, essentially, some of the TED Talk. But it comes from a Carter family song, and weirdly enough, the Carter family song comes from an even older spiritual song, and that's a good example of the folk process. Is that the melodies often stay the same, but the lyrics change depending on whose hands they're in to adapt to like cultural and societal norms just of the time. So that's what the TED Talk focused on. And we do that with a lot of our art that we make. Like on our last album, we had a song called Good and Greasy, which is a public domain song. So we rewrote it about consumerism. But it was originally a song just about like cooking bacon. I thought that like a 1910 song about cooking bacon. But we made
when did you record that TED Talk? Because it said 6 months ago, but probably you recorded it a bit before then. So when
it was almost exactly a year ago or something. Or
I think it was like
maybe
September.
it was September, yeah, last year.
So this was kind of before ChatGPT, now the Midjourney and all this, the AI vocals. So what do you think of it now?
Yeah, of the folk process, and yeah,
because all these songs are dropping, with Lennon singing McCartney
exactly
songs,
right.
and
no, it's so true. I could give the TED Talk again, and
you're gonna have to.
It would feel like it's amazing how over the course of 6 months it feels like so much has changed.
Yeah,
because at the time I gave the TED Talk, the images that these image generators were putting out looked terrible, and now they're like photorealistic. So yeah, to some extent, I think that some parties can get too litigious with their music. I think of us as artists, as creators, and like once we've created something, I think the world kind of owns it.
Okay.
That's not the opinion that a lot of artists I know
So
share.
you're happy with all this? You'll welcome it as part of the creative, as another tool. You think?
Yeah.
Because hopefully I'm looking forward to the time in 3 or 4 months when I can just upload the conversation, and then I'll download the
Yeah,
song.
exactly.
And I'll be able to release that, and I'll be able to get up to 300 a year that way.
Yeah,
That would be awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that while it's good to protect creators and content creators and musicians and stuff like that, making sure they have a way to earn income, I get that we all have to live under capitalism and the society, but I also think that art belongs to the people, and so I am still sort of grappling with what my personal opinion is on
It's changing.
AI and art. I do think that one way around it is by crediting people who are sampled from or borrowed from at the very minimum. And just credit isn't often enough. It's also good to, if you are making money off of something that directly takes from something else, to give them ownership or equity in what you're doing.
Okay. Well, also just checking out your Instagram, just to jump to Heidi for a minute. I don't like the idea of you sitting there, because I know what Dillon's, he's a creative. You also doing these amazing Instagram.
Yes.
Oh.
That's so, and dressing Dillon up. I know he's not dressing himself up, but in these amazing clothes as well, which is
Yeah.
So
you're a lucky man, Dillon. I wish.
gardening stuff.
Well, I mean, we spend a ton of time in the garden. And it's been our new special interests. I feel like I have special interests, and Dillon has things that he gets like totally focused on.
Oh yeah, he's obsessive. I can tell that.
Yes. And so one of the things that he has been very focused on has been AI artwork.
Oh yeah, just because of all the stuff that you're talking about now.
So he's been using that to make all of these photos of us looking amazing and cool. And he uses them with photos that we'll take in the garden and uses them with photos of our actual flowers that we're growing and things like that.
Yeah, I like the mixed medium stuff. I like mixing old with new and combining things, just like with Metropolis. Not
There's a real red line through your work. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we'll be out in the garden, and I take some pictures of Heidi, and then I'll come inside and like put them in Photoshop, and then run them through Stable Diffusion or Midjourney, and just mix the media, and so it gives it an interesting texture, much like the Gravel Yard video.
Yeah. And I wanted to say about the Gravel Yard video that in the movie Metropolis, like a big overarching concept in the film is that technology is bad and technology is evil innately and it will take over. And so I think it was also really cool to be using AI at the same time as that scene where technology is kind of seducing the bourgeoisie. And I think the AI is kind of the modern take on that. And we're always trying to bring a modern take onto something like public domain music, something from the past. We're trying to bring that back in a modern setting.
Yeah, in that scene, you literally have an android, shake it money maker or whatever you want to call it for an audience of like rich upper worlders, as they're called. And
Well,
like,
you guys are so accelerated because I know Dillon, you're won guitar competitions at 11 years old after playing the guitar for a couple of months, and then you've gone through that. You've gone through bluegrass, country, and your album that's most successful is this kind of experimental country. Is that the right way?
yes.
And now you've kind of left that arc. You're already the society's quickening, but you're taking a big dose of it, no?
I get really bored. So like I did guitar, just hyper focused on guitar for like 5 years, or I guess from the time I was 11 to I was 17. And when I was 17, I won the national guitar championship. So after that, I was like, well, I moved on to something else, and moving on to something else was like writing songs. And then, trying to bring pop music with the bluegrass music that I grew up listening to was what became Firekid. And that's how I met Heidi, was from the first Firekid album. She was doing something similar with classic country and pop. So we just were like, okay, let's do this together.
Okay. And then now you're doing, so what's the way to describe in the Gravel Yard? Because that's not really, what sound is that? Have we got a new genre here? Or?
Whoa.
We've been calling it experimental Appalachian music.
Experiment, but there's no good real way for me to describe it. It's still influenced by traditional roots, American roots music and bluegrass and folk, but it's also pulls from all different kinds of things. I mean, the drum style feels like a Bill Withers song. Strings feel like, Elliott Smith, Nick Drake, Radiohead kind of when they did acoustic stuff. And there's a lot of reharmonizations that are going on in it that you wouldn't find very many places, meaning like the melody is a traditional bluegrass melody, but the chords behind it are totally irreverent to that. So it just goes back and forth between major and minor interchangeably, which creates like a stressful.
I know, it's coupled with the video. I'm still disorientated. With your background, I'm not going to sleep very well tonight.
Well, that's because you had it on repeat.
Oh my God. So there's never a dull moment in the house then, Heidi?
No.
Not with our two cats.
We have 2 cats and this guy bouncing around. No, I don't get bored anyway. I could sit still and play Zelda for like a month and I'd be fine.
Probably a good time to mention like how we keep up with our own tempo here. We started streaming on Twitch in 2021, which is primarily like a live streaming website for people who game. And so we came on the platform and started just playing music live because we weren't playing shows. And we loved it. It felt like we found our thing.
Mhm.
And so we've broadened now, and we stream 4 days a week on Twitch. Mondays we just garden for a long time, and then Tuesdays we cook. Wednesdays we have we play games or do
Wow.
and then Thursdays we do music. So we get to do all of our interests and do paid for it.
It's awesome. And
So you built-
instead of, I feel like when we played shows, when we would tour before, we would be on stage and we'd see people for maybe 2 hours and we give them our set and we maybe make some jokes or have some banter in between and maybe do like meet and greet at the end. But that's all the interaction that we're going to have and that the audience is going to have with us. But then when we started streaming, we could really bring them into our home, into our life, and just kind of be in here with us, which was really cool because we can really show them a lot more than just playing some songs and a few jokes that we've made a couple times before.
That's right. Yeah. Really laughing at.
Well, that's
Yeah.
how I pitch Podsongs to artists as well, is because everyone's getting, everyone's creating these 30-second snippets, 10 seconds, and cutting up the same one. But you don't get really a depth understanding of the artist's interests outside of music. And this is a way to, talk to you for an hour and a half about, what makes you as a person, what makes the person that makes the art.
Mhm.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for us, I like Twitch, and you are a enjoyer of long form content as a podcast man.
Yeah.
And so I think long form content is really special. It feels distinctly different from the other side of modern content, which is like TikTok or Instagram Reels, where it's like very short. So I think there's got to be some sort of happy medium between like being able as a content creator to have long form content where you can actually like make money and build relationships and have a community that support shoot, but also have the discoverability of that like short 15-second thing. It really seems like it's both, and it's tough out there to be a musician these days. So we're fortunate that we enjoy doing a lot of different things with our music.
Mhm.
Yeah. Plus, you have such a stylish home and wonderful garden.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we worked hard on it.
Yeah.
It was kind of tough when we bought it. So the first year we moved into the house, we were like fixing it up.
Mhm.
It's 1950s, and we just left the old appliances in it.
That's everything you're pulling from the 1950s and 90. You're pulling from the
I
past.
know.
Mhm.
There's a red
another-
line right
yeah,
through the.
yeah,
Yeah, it's what we like.
yeah. I can't help it. I guess it was natural.
Because you're also doing this as well as 4 days a week twitching and doing all the other things you do. You're also doing this PBS show, Reconnecting Roots, which
Mhm.
is also and an accompanying podcast, as if there wasn't enough work.
Yes.
So you're no stranger to creative podcasts. It's
No,
No.
I love
Projects.
podcasts.
Yeah.
Reconnecting Roots. We just finished season 3, just aired on PBS here in America, and I think anybody can watch it on PBS.org. It's free, but it's called Reconnecting Roots, and it's exactly what we do, except for we met some people who make a TV show about it. So they take a topic, any topic. It could be trains or transportation, and they will show the origins of transportation in America and how it became what it is today. And it's just another example of combining old and new. And so we did the music for it. It's,
Mhm.
it was like the perfect fit.
But is there a song for each episode? That you
Yes,
pick an
yes.
old song. And
So for each episode, there's a theme, and we take an old public domain song and completely rewrite it and reproduce it in a modern way.
wow. So what kind of songs have you done, just to give the audience an?
Yeah, I can let you hear them. You can totally keep them in the episode if you want to hear it.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Let me pull it up. So season 3, like I said, just wrapped. And this season we did like Moonlight Bay and hold on one sec, pull it up. We featured some guest artists from Smithsonian Folkways, which is a label here in America. We did Take Me Out to the Ball Game, Blue Skies from the movie Jazz Singer. It just entered public domain this year. So let's do Moonlight Bay since we've got the
Oh,
background.
the Abyss.
Yes,
Yeah.
The Abyss.
I don't get that so well. It's not coming through my.
Oh, it's not.
Oh,
But go to the website. Where's the best place
Yeah.
to?
Yeah, it's on Spotify. So
On
you can
Spotify.
go to Reconnecting Roots on Spotify, and
Okay.
you'll be able to hit the whole
So,
soundtrack.
are you going into recording season 4 now? Is that what you'll be working on?
Yes, actually,
we're working on it actually today,
the music
yesterday.
supervisor is in town here in Alabama with us right now from Nashville, and we're working on it this week.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were going to, we did get the guest finally for you,
Yep.
Yes.
We're excited.
Yeah. Yes.
Robert McKee.
Uh-huh.
Robert McKee is a sort of how to describe him? Story.
He's like a script whisperer. He fixes
Script
people's film scripts.
Wow.
Yeah.
He's also was in a movie called, or his character was in a film called Adaptation, if you're familiar with it.
He
Really, that's a cult movie. Yeah.
yeah.
About him.
Well, not the movie is
Yeah,
about him.
but-
There is a character in the movie that is a reference toward him. But he's an author, and he helps teach people how to write scripts and screenplays and for movies or television shows. And he gets really in depth on how to do that.
Aesthetic theory, really, at the heart of
And he teaches you about just story making in particular. My favorite thing, he has workshops that you can pay and go to, and they're very informative. But my favorite thing that he does there is he has you watch the film Casablanca with the script in front of us, and he goes through every single scene, and we discuss, and we see the original script so we can see what it used to be, and he talks about why it changed to something else and why this is important in culture. And what this is a metaphor for. And it is just, he does it on the last day. And honestly, it's better than any of the other stuff just because it's so cool. It makes you really appreciate Casablanca as a piece of art.
Yes.
But so he's just very intelligent and thoughtful and loves consuming art and has a lot of opinions about it.
How many interests do you have? Do you guys sleep? Are you?
I love to sleep.
I don't sleep.
He doesn't like to sleep, but I love it.
Where do you find the time? How do you find? Are you going to do a movie as well? Are you?
He stays busy so that I don't have to.
Well, there's a period of time when Heidi was employed by a film company and was writing scripts. So Heidi is a writer. That's what she does. Like, she writes songs primarily, but also understands film theory enough to where she's consulted on a couple movies in the past.
Mhm.
Okay.
But like when we met, she was working for a film company in addition to.
I'm just trying to fill in the picture. I need another hour.
I've had a lot of jobs, and so I feel like I have a lot of strange interests just because of that. And Dillon, I feel like you're a naturally pretty inquisitive person, and so you have interest because of that. And we both like to read, so
Yeah.
Because wasn't one of the other guests quantum physics? We were going to quantum physics.
Yeah. Roger Penrose. Roger Penn.
So you're
That's
into
dope.
quantum physics as well in your spare time.
Yeah. I'm very into physics and cosmology specifically. I'm
feeling very inferior here on the show.
no.
I thought I was a busy man. I'm producing.
You can only know a little bit of all of these things when you're so interested in so many
Yeah.
things. So
This is true. And as we're going to be talking to Lee today, and Lee is an expert in Aristotle and Nietzsche, and so there was a time probably 3 years ago now when I was just consuming so much Nietzsche and Aristotle and philosophy, like source material broadly, and it occurred to me like last week, I was like, I need to refresh on eudaimonia, some of these.
Don't we all?
yeah, seriously.
Aristotle's notion of happiness and flourishing and all this stuff that I hope we get to talk to Lee about. But yeah, no, I have lots of interest. But I can't hold on to any of them. You have to revisit things that you like.
Mhm.
So that stuff sticks in the end.
Mhm.
All right. Well, I think people will have to re-listen to this, or go to the live Twitch to get to know you better. I think we got
Yeah.
I think we got
Yeah.
immersed in firekid there. So let's draw a line in the sand now, and let's take a breath in, give our listeners a little breather, and in the 5 minutes before our guests join, let's talk about them. Who are we expecting, and what are we going to be talking about? Because I'd also like to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you, I can read their bios when they come on, but, or if you'd like me to read them now, I can. But basically, Lee, is a Professor of Theology at Lipscomb University. And Brad is a multi-platinum songwriter and producer. He's a good friend of ours. We collaborate and write songs with him very often.
They both live in Nashville,
live in
Tennessee,
Nashville.
which is regionally very close to us.
Yeah.
And we both used to live there.
That's right. And so, but Lee and Brad are also friends. So Brad introduced us to Lee and was the reason that we were on Lee's podcast, which is actually a live variety show.
Okay, what's the name of his podcast? Endeavor?
No Small Endeavor is his
No Small Endeavor.
podcast.
And so you were on an
Yes.
episode of No Small Endeavor? Or you?
Yes, it was formerly called Tokens. It was called Tokens when we did it, and it's been branded. I think the mission is a little bit broader now. I can let him sort of explain the difference when he gets here. But yeah,
what was the episode about?
It was on the intersection between social justice and religion's role in it, so to speak. And the guest was Justin Jones, who has become famous in America recently because and we did the podcast before this happened, but he's become famous in America recently because he was an elected official in the state of Tennessee and protested as an elected official against gun violence, and he was expelled from his seat, and then subsequently re-elected.
Two other people were as well. They call them the Tennessee Three.
The Tennessee Three. This just happened,
but he's awesome.
Or something. Yeah, he's awesome. So he's he was the guest, and he used religion to justify his dissent, so to speak. And I found it interesting that he used his religion to justify his dissent, and so did the police who were arresting him.
Ah, right.
And so the song that we wrote about it, Candyland, talks about the idea of religion's role in society.
Super exciting for me. I don't know anything about this. I haven't heard the song. I'm excited. So this is interesting for me. We had Shane Claiborne on the show. I wrote a song for him called Beating Guns, because he goes around, well, he does many things, but you bring your guns and they'll melt them down and turn them into garden tools, which some of you
amazing. I would like this very much.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
Beating Guns is .com or whatever. Yeah, he goes around with a big old fire and iron and hammers away.
That's so cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You get a hoe made out of a gun.
Yeah.
Weapon of mass production.
Yeah, and it also is that making something out of something else that we like.
Yeah, that's true. It's like right up our alley.
Oh. But yeah, no, the podcast and the show obviously stuck with us. We're non-religious, but pretty much everyone in our life is. So it's like how to relate to someone you love when you and they sometimes feel like you have nothing in common.
So it's not about, the Candyland is not specifically about guns. It's about the use of religion as a...
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the use of religion to, control people to some extent.
But our gun regulations and lack thereof in America is largely due to a group of people with a very specific religious belief, religious persuasion. So strange, that's part of it.
Yeah. Also, the thou shalt not kill was pretty. I remember that being pretty much at the top of.
Yeah, it is like the number one thing, but it's interesting that it's sometimes easy to justify things that stand in direct opposition to what you claim to believe. It just happens all the time. We
do it with war. Anytime there's a war, we throw that out the window. It's like, well, we have to. We're defending ourselves. It's like, well, it didn't say thou shalt not kill unless you're defending yourself. What's up, Brad?
What's up, dude?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Cool. I don't have a cool background like you.
That's a platinum background. That's
Yeah,
You-
yours is
Yeah. Platinum is beyond space, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
space. Wait, space is beyond platinum. I'm not sure.
Platinum is formed in a supernova explosion, Brad. So it's kind of similar. In a
so
way.
we're on our way.
Yours is real. Ours is CGI.
So, yeah, there's no such thing as platinum records anymore, though, right?
Ugh.
No, or is it just
I- Hello, is this Jack, by the way?
oh,
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Hi.
You could introduce me, guys.
Yes.
Very-
This is Brad. Brad, this is Jack.
Hi, Brad.
Hello, Jack.
They like this? Can they see it this way too?
I don't know
Or is
how
this
they
just
see
us?
it, but, you know,
Okay.
You-
I don't know if you guys are in the middle or not,
Yeah.
but there you go.
yeah, I was just telling them a little bit about you, but I didn't know since we have. Oh, perfect.
Oh, wow.
Me as well. So
Here it comes.
I'll give the proper introduction when everybody.
Yeah.
everybody- Brad, thank you for doing this.
Thank you for inviting me. You guys been having a good discussion?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we were talking about our firekid music, and streaming on Twitch and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Well, hi,
Let's look
Lee.
at this.
Welcome.
You've got your upright in the background.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. That's right.
Jack's got a guitar too. I think back there is.
Yeah, go.
Oh, and a piano.
Let's go.
Yes, really. Jack, this is Lee. Lee, this is Jack.
Hello, Lee. Nice to meet
Pleasure to
you.
meet you, Jack. Thanks
And
y'all for
Lee
having
and
me. I
Brad
appreciate
already
it.
know each other.
So good to
I
see
know.
you. I will give the sort of bios, tell everybody who everybody is.
Jack on first.
Oh, Jack, did you want to say something first?
No, I'm fine. This is where you take over.
Okay.
Okay.
That's what I thought. Okay, so I've got some bios here for you guys. So Lee Camp, Doctor of Moral Theology, is Professor of Theology and Ethics at Lipscomb University. He also hosts the variety show No Small Endeavor, exploring the social ethics and human flourishing, featuring an untold number of Grammy and Pulitzer Prize winners. He's also an author. His latest work, Scandalous Witness, A Little Political Manifesto for Christians, is out now. More importantly, he's an all-around kind fellow and music lover who is willing to admit that Nietzsche is occasionally right.
Wow.
And
Well said. Well said.
we're also joined by Brad Crisler, a multi-platinum songwriter, singer, and producer, a scholar in his own right. Brad is the guest on the Thomas Jefferson Hour on NPR, a weekly radio program dedicated to the search for truth and to the tradition of Thomas Jefferson, and an expert on early American art as well. He now operates Truman B. Crisler Fine Portrait Miniatures.
And occasionally play a piano.
That's
Mhm.
true. As
Yeah.
you can see, he's got some drum machines and synths behind him. So, so I'm so glad to have you guys on. So I did a TED Talk, or I was getting ready to do a TED Talk last year on Woody Guthrie and touched on protest music a little bit. And Brad, a friend of mine, introduced me to Lee. And Lee, you had us on the then called Tokens, now called No Small Endeavor, to play on an episode that largely talked about protests. The guest was Justin Jones, and a lot of the topics that came up and that you guys discussed were really inspirational. We had a great time. We loved the whole thing. And after the podcast, we came home and wrote this song Candyland off and on for the next few months, but with Brad that touched on themes of modern Christianity, and its perception in popular culture, its role in political, conservative politics. And so I just thought we could maybe discuss Christianity and its place in American society and evangelicals, and maybe,
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Um,
Sounds great.
Okay,
Sounds great.
so now that all the formalities are out of the way, I saw a Pew Research poll that said that the number of adults identified as Christians who are self-identified as Christians has decreased, and they said by 12%, which seemed really high over the last decade. And I wondered if you had any thoughts on why that could be.
You're asking me, I suppose.
Yes.
Well, I've seen the some of those studies, and I think that I can't recollect the precise factors that those studies indicate people give, but my recollection of some of those, as well as my own experience anecdotally, is that there's a large amount of dismay with partisan political ideology and the way that large swaths of American Christianity have been co-opted into those sorts of agendas, and then the way in which that sort of political co-option then yields itself into things like nationalism, yields itself into contemporary expressions of racism in certain contexts, though that's a much more complicated conversation because there are a number of scholars that are making a convincing case that racism was well, we talk more about that later if we want to, but that's not just a contemporary problem, obviously. It's a much older problem. And so there's just a lot of frustration that what it seems like Christianity really is at its best has not been borne out in the lived experience of a lot of people, and they're just kind of disgusted with it and don't find that what Christianity is in America in many cases is really doing what it promises it would do, or it's not bearing the kind of fruit that it seems to promise it could bear. And so I think a lot of folks are just walking away from it. I think it's also I'll say this, and I'd love to hear what anybody else wants to say about this, but I think there are other aspects as well of larger cultural trends in terms of the fact that what we see in the last 50 years is an increasing individualization and individualism that undercuts almost all commitments to a social community. And so there's lots of sociological studies that point to the fact that what we're seeing is increasing loneliness, increasing ways in which the technology, the consumerism that are so prevalent in Western civilization are eating. They're kind of like an acid that eats away at any sort of communal commitment. And so we're so distracted even from asking questions like, what's the meaning of life and what kind of life do I want to give myself to? Which provincially, of course, has been at least one of the things that Christianity at its best has tried to do. And so increasingly, all of the resources that we've had to kind of try to do that kind of stuff, live for something larger than ourselves, live in a sort of, it takes a lot of work to live in community, right? And
Yes.
so when we're so distracted by consumerism and so forth, that as well eats away at a lot of these kind of commitments.
Brad, do you have any personal opinion on the decline of people identifying as Christians?
Yeah, I mean, all of that is, resonates truth to me, and in my experience, and people who, I've been in faith community with who have now, fallen out of favor with that faith and gone on to find different expressions of community and faith outside of the institutional church. I'm curious. I was wondering why you were talking, Lee, is first of all, I'm sure this decrease in our culture and participation and people who, claim and participate in Christian community is not a singular iteration. Like we've had these ebbs and flows throughout the history of Christianity in different parts of the world, perhaps for different reasons. But historically, I'm curious if if this kind of decline and this kind of, and maybe, and we can get into more of this later, but this kind of shift to Christianity expressed in kind of a nationalism or geopolitical, the influence of the nation state in political and culture wars. If this is kind of a singular event in American history in our current moment, or are there other times in history where we've had this kind of thing happen before?
Yeah, I mean, there's I forget the numbers, but I remember in the last year talking to a historian who was reminding me that church attendance in the early American experience was very, very low. I'm thinking he said something like 20% in the late 1700s. And of course, then you have the the Great Awakening, 1800s, and so there's been these moments of revival where church attendance has gone up. And then I guess it was at its greatest in the 1950s, 1960s. And then we've seen a slow decline since then. And of course, for a long time, one of the things that kind of you would hear among a lot of evangelical types was a sort of somewhat, I always read it as a somewhat snide looking down their noses at mainline Protestants, because the slide in church adherence was sharpest among mainline Protestants until about the last decade or so, if I remember the numbers correctly. And then there's been this sharp decline among evangelicals more recently. And so it's kind of like everybody's kind of getting walloped by this. And so I think the kind of historical trends have been important to note, that it's gone up and down a lot through the last couple of centuries in the American experience. Second thing I want to note about that question is that nationalism and or imperialism and or colonialism, and the ways in which Christianity has had this uneasy alliance with that, is a very, very old, ill-fated, in my opinion, ill-fated quest, and so this goes back at least to the 4th century AD, where the historians will talk about the so-called Constantinian shift. So Christianity in its first 3 centuries is a minority, sometimes persecuted religious sect. And you're getting Christians still persecuted by Emperors Decius and Emperors Diocletian at the very end of the 3rd century. And then at the beginning of the 4th century, Constantine makes Christianity finally a legal religion. And so, and then by the end of the 4th century, Emperor Theodosius makes Christianity the only legal religion in the Roman Empire. And so it's this incredible shift from persecuted, within a century later, you're the only legal religion. And then in time, that sets up the church to persecute those who are not Christian. So it's this huge social shift, sociological shift. And then you have other sorts of ugly things that come out of that new alliance with imperialist power. And so it's a very, very old temptation, if you will. And now Kristen DeMay, in her recent New York Times bestseller, Jesus and John Wayne, she lays all this stuff out in the American experience in a very compelling, distressing historical narrative. But one thing that she reminds us is that in the early part of the 20th century, it was actually the Protestant liberals who were much more nationalistic than evangelicals. Evangelicals, in many ways, early part of the 20th century, were very apolitical. They didn't want to have anything to do with politics. They didn't want to do with social system structures. And so it was the liberals, Protestant liberals and mainline Protestants, they were very dogged nationalists, right? Some of the most distressing nationalism you can get is from early 20th century Christian, president of the United States among them. But then in time, middle part of the 20th century, then the evangelicals, they want to get in on the game. And that then comes full flower in the last 50, 60, 70 years.
Yeah. Interesting. I was going to say, with regards to, Christians and being tied in with politics and everything that comes with that, do you see Jesus as a fundamentally political figure of the time?
I do. And this is one of the things that I've written about at some length. I actually, what a lot of people want to say is that Christianity is not political. And a lot of times they'll say that because they're so disgusted with in these days, evangelical alliance with politics, right?
More nowadays, like the guy who ran for Senate in Alabama, Roy Moore,
Yeah.
the guy with the Ten Commandments, when we think of political Christians. So
Right. Yeah. So we're so terrified, and rightfully so, of the Roy Moores of the world that the way we try to distance ourselves from that is by saying, well, Christianity is not political. And what I've been saying for the last number of years is that anybody who says Christianity is not political has no idea what Christianity is.
Mhm.
And so what I mean by that, though, is very different than what partisan adherents of U.S. politics mean when they want to make Christianity political, right? So, Jesus uses language of the kingdom of God, which is itself an explicitly political assertion. And then he talks about things like enemies, how you deal with enemies, forgiveness, debt and money, marriage, um, violence, reconciliation. And like, what kind of questions are those? Well, they're political questions, right? And so, but what Jesus does is he gives us a completely different construal of what politics is. That's completely different than either the right or the left in the American political experience. And so, and I don't mean by that Christians should never say, I believe what this person over here on the left is saying is correct, or I believe what this person on the right is saying is correct. But it's just that those are different ways of construing politics than Christian orthodoxy is describing politics. And so I do think it's political. And then the question becomes, well, how do we play that out, or what does it mean to concretely or practically live according to this alternative politic?
So, kingdom of God, is that like, sometimes I hear, Christian nationalists talk about building a Christian nation. I feel like I read a paper from you and you had strong opinions about what the idea of a Christian nation. Do you agree with the idea of a Christian nation or disagree? I guess.
Yeah.
It does as well.
Yeah, I would like to go on record as saying I disagree with the notion of a Christian nation probably as strongly as one could. And so, in my most recent book, Scandalous Witness, I have a chapter on this, and I say that it's wrong. It's wrong to assert that the United States is or was or could again be a Christian nation for three reasons. And the three reasons are: historically, it's wrong; theologically, it's wrong; and strategically or practically, it's wrong. And so historically, it's wrong just from there's all sorts of historical evidence that a number of or a lot of the founding fathers of the country were very explicitly aware of the fact that we are not creating a Christian country.
Yeah.
And then that's different, as we might get into later, to say that it doesn't mean that certain basic Christian commitments or philosophies were not informing the establishment of Western democracies, which I actually think they are. And, this new book by Tom Holland, Dominion, which is fascinating. That point is British historian, it's fascinating the way he talks about some of the great gifts of Christianity to Western civilization. And so I'm not denying, and I want to celebrate the way in which the good parts of Western civilization and Western political liberal democracies are indebted to Christianity. I think that that's true, but that's different than trying to establish a Christian nation, a geopolitical order that is a geographically bounded nation state. So that gets to the second thing. Theologically, it's problematic because a nation state is an entity that is bounded geographically, and then it uses military might to protect its borders. And it has procedures to say who is a citizen, who is not a citizen. And those very commitments themselves are opposed to Christianity. Christianity is a transnational communion of people in whom anybody that wants to can be a citizen, a member of this body politic. And so obviously that's a very different thing than a nation state. So when you try to marry Christianity and a nation state, you're just trying to breed two things that don't breed together. They're just two very different things. And then third, it's a problematic thing to try to make Christianity a nation state strategically, because I think all you do is you just create a lot of ill will. There's a lot of people in the United States, of our neighbors, that don't want to be Christians. And Christianity is committed to soul freedom, right? To conscience that allows people to make a choice as to whether or not they want to be Christians. And so when we try to do a lot of the stunts that a lot of Christians try to do in the name of a Christian nation, you're again, theologically, you're undercutting their freedom to be what they want to be and be what they want to do, what they want to do. And you're also just strategically, it's just bad rhetoric, and it's bad strategy, and it's a bad way to try to win people to what you're trying to establish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you as a Christianity, as opposed to Hinduism or Judaism, is creedal, right? As opposed to something you're born into, and so that's what you're. So like a Hindu state could potentially work, but where Christianity could not, is what you're saying.
I certainly think Christianity could not. Yes.
Yeah. Heidi, you had a question for Mr. Chan.
I have two questions. One is a little easier, and then the other one's super hard hitting, and that'll be my last one because that's for my personal research. But my first question is God dead, and have we killed him?
Why don't you tell me what you
Yes.
different people
No,
mean different things by
okay.
that question. So I'd
No.
like to hear more about what you mean by that question.
Okay, so I was
No.
growing up in the South here. You can't not see the little movie things outside of people's houses that's like, God is not dead. It's like they literally read one Nietzsche half of a sentence and they were like, no. And they just made like 5 movies based off of that.
Yeah,
And-
my understanding of what you're talking about, thus spoke Zarathustra. and
Yeah.
My understanding of what he meant when he said that was, he's coming down from the mountain, and he runs into a pious man who's talking about what a beautiful day God has made, and Zarathustra says, "Does he not know that God is dead?" And when he says that, he says that he seems to be saying to me that like science has done away with the need for God, but he doesn't feel super happy. He's not happy about it. He's actually it's like, go away from me before I take something away from you, to the pious man. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
there's still a need for Christianity, I guess. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
It's-
Yeah.
Do you think? So I guess what I am trying to ask is, do you think that it's like the worldly things that have killed God, or Christianity and how it was at its height?
Oh, yeah.
Or do you think it could possibly be the calls coming from inside the house kind of situation?
Yeah. I see. Yeah. Yes, I
Mhm.
think would be my answer. And I mean on the first question you asked there, I mean, it's common to hear folks speak of the disenchantment of the world following the Enlightenment, right? And so the notion that the ways in which we see, well, isn't this a beautiful day that God has made? That sort of medieval and earlier views in Christian much theist practice is a sort of everything's enchanted with the glory of God, right? And with the beauty of God and the presence of God. And there's a way in which the scientific method, and we could even go on and say a sort of ideological pursuit of science, it's kind of disenchanted the world. And so there are things that we know now. And, I myself don't hesitate, don't have a problem with, for example, in the United States is not so much an issue, Jack, in the UK, but, in the United States, lots of Christians can't imagine that you could possibly accept the finding of Charles Darwin with regard to the theory of evolution and still be a Christian. But, in my mind, actually you can, and there are a lot of people who do, but there's still a sort of disenchantment, I guess, about the way you might think about certain things if you accept the theory of evolution or whatever the case may be. And so whatever we mean by God or who God is or the presence of God, it requires us to kind of continue to renegotiate that or renavigate that, or to continue to think about how we say that in any sort of sensical way. And on your second question, has the death of God, if you will, put that quotation marks, been a consequence of the failure of the church itself? I am, unfortunately, I would have to say in many cases, yes, I think that that's true. And that we have been our own worst enemies with regard to bearing witness to who we believe God is. But so often what happens is that a lot of people want to point their fingers at somebody else without letting judgment, as scripture says, if judgment begins with the household of God, which is a terrifying sort of claim of scripture, that it points to saying you gotta judge yourself. If you're going to judge anybody, judge yourself first. And so I think we would do ourselves a big favor if we would take that seriously, rather than looking at the secularists out there. In many cases, the secularists are just they're really not interested in. They find it kind of boring. They're not really interested in hearing you now.
Hopefully they're judging themselves too first. Everybody's kind of doing their own internal work.
Yeah.
So I wanted to. Well, did you want to ask your second question now, or do you want to?
No, I'll ask it later.
Okay.
So
So
keep us in suspense.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk something that just broadly to talk about with Yuli and with you, Brad, when we did the No Small Endeavor show as musical special guest. The thing I was most interested in was Justin Jones's interview, and he said something. So what would you like to give any background on Justin Jones? Lee, you probably could do it better than me. He was in why don't you, I'll let you.
Yeah. So for those who may not be aware who Justin is, so Justin is a member of the famous now, infamous now, depending on where you're coming from, Tennessee 3, who were ejected from or expelled from the Tennessee state legislature recently. And then they were, the two of them were, three were kind of set up for charges to be expelled. The two African Americans were expelled. The white woman from Memphis was not. But then, so both of the Justins then were reinstated by their local authorities and sent back to the state house. There will still be a new election to see if they can still hold their seats, but that's what's happened. And they were expelled purportedly based upon behaviors that they took up following speaking out against gun violence following the horrific shooting here in Nashville at the Covenant School, and pushing the Tennessee state legislature to take seriously legislation against gun violence. Previously, Justin Jones had been very involved in a lot of social activism, standing in opposition to the Tennessee state legislature. He had been actually banned from the grounds of the Tennessee state legislature for, I think it was 12 months, and then subsequently was elected to then be a member of the Tennessee state legislature. So he's come in under this sort of activist history of being arrested a bunch of times, and then he gets elected, and he comes in, and he's been there a very short period of time and gets expelled, and now he's still working in the Tennessee State House.
Yeah, when that happened, I remember seeing that just those two got expelled, and of course the white lady did not.
Yeah, two black men named Justin got expelled. The white lady didn't.
But I remember thinking, man, last time he did this, he came back as state representative. He's going to come back as governor if they don't.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, exactly. So one of my favorite things that he said is that he went from the jailhouse to the state house.
Yeah, that was cool. That's going to be his
people's house.
Yeah. Bio.
Yeah, it's so good.
For the state house. My favorite thing he said, can I say this?
Yes.
My favorite thing he said in that interview was, and I'll never forget it. He said, "Don't trust a movement that doesn't have music."
Yes.
Mm.
It was so good
Yes,
because he
Yes.
is in movements as well. Like the play on words is so good. But then also like if the social movement doesn't have music, there's no soul in it.
Yes,
He's
that's
so right.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and so we knew of Justin through friends who occupied the state house to get the Nathan Bedford Forrest statue taken out. So we already knew his work, and
We agreed to it because we're friends with Brad, but also we had heard that
Yeah,
Justin Jones was on it, and I
so
was
it's
like,
just
oh, I
oh,
love that guy. We
don't
gotta
you know,
go.
Like, love both of these people, so it was just so awesome. But um, it was fascinating to me, and this is probably the kernel of what the you know what we're getting at here. He personally described his descent. I have the quote here, as a calling of his faith. He said he believed in something higher than the laws of the building he works in. I thought that was so interesting, and it was contrasted by his own words to he talked about the men who arrested him, uh, citing scripture about respecting authority as they're arresting him. So like both sides of this conflict were citing their faith in a way to sort of explain their actions.
Right.
But Justin was doing it in a way that was lifting up others and pushing society forward, and the other one is like authoritarian, and so I don't know. I guess what do you guys think should be the goal of Christianity in society moving forward? Like I said, we are not Christians, but everyone we love is, for the most
And we were raised
and we were raised
in Alabama and Tennessee.
and,
So
I don't like, so I see the positive aspects of it, and I see the good that it can do. And like I said, so many people I love believe in this. So, um, what is the positive future that you could both see, the end goal of Christianity in society? I think you wrote a paper on it, a great paper on it, Lee, a while ago. But anyway, either of you.
Brad, you want to go first?
I have no paper. I've written no paper. Questions. So
But you always have relatively thoughtful opinions.
yeah.
relative. Yeah, but the context is usually not in the presence of a biblical scholar. I'll let you start, and then I'll affirm you.
Well, that at least relates to the question of what is the goal of Christianity,
Yes,
Mhm,
exactly.
mhm.
and then one can extrapolate from what the goal of Christianity is to what the goal of Christianity could be with regard to making a contribution to the societal context in which any given group of Christians find themselves. And my understanding of Christianity and Christian orthodoxy is that it's quite different than what a lot of Christians understand it to be. And a lot of Christians understand Christianity to be this sort of religion that if you do X, Y, and Z, or you believe A, B, and C, that when you die, you can go to heaven. And this is like non-controversial among a majority of Christians, I think, probably in the West. And I would just suggest that actually is not Christianity. And I'm not making this as an argument as a progressive. I'm making this argument based upon very old Christian orthodoxy. And Christian orthodoxy claims that the goal of Christianity is the redemption of the created world. And that whatever this means or looks like, it's this promise that God the Creator has made that through Christ, the redemption of heavens and earth has begun, in which death has been overcome by life and by love, and that death has been defeated but not yet consummately, and that someday in some point in the unfolding of history, there will be a consummate defeat of death, in which life will triumph consummately over death, and all of the handmaidens of death, the sickness, the warring, the hostility, the hatred will all be overcome, and the glorious will of God, whom we believe to be good and true and beautiful, will be done on earth even as it is in heaven. Now, that's a lot of apocalyptic, metaphorical, allegorical, poetical language I just used. And
Yes.
so I'm not interested in making that a fundamentalist sort of literalist claim, but I'm saying that I think that it's true. And that's the goal of Christianity. And so I mean, even you think about the book of Revelation, so-called street of gold, most people assume that the street of gold is up there somewhere in heaven, but that's actually not what the book of Revelation says at all. The book of Revelation is about, and again, it's apocalyptic literature, not to be read literally,
Yeah.
but it's pointing to that the end of the story is about the world becoming a place in which God can be at home in our midst, wipe away every tear from every eye, in which there'll be new heavens and new earth, and all things will be set right. And that's the goal of Christianity. And so for life for us now, the task is, as we're between the times of the inauguration and the consummation of that beautiful vision, our job is to do the best we can with the resources that we've been given and the gifts we've been given to sow the seeds of that kind of world, through whether it's through our music, whether it's through our writing, whether it's through the work we do in healing the sick, whether it's through education, whatever it may be. That's what we're called to do, to sow the seeds of this beautiful world that we believe is on its way. And not to treat the world as if it's something that's going to be burned up and thrown in a trash can,
Right.
but to see it as the beautiful work of God that we have been called as stewards to care for and love and to serve our neighbors. And so that kind of points pretty rapidly to a sort of contribution to our societal context, I think. It requires some care, and it requires a non-ideological, non-partisan commitment to that kind of stuff. But it at least points us to an agenda, I think.
Yeah. So, just to keep the thread here, like so I grew up in this, and I always found the teachings of the end times to be really nihilistic, in that, like, the world is a lost cause meant to fall. A battle of good and evil will destroy the world, in the end. And so, so it seems like the issue is, what is it? A difference in connotation and denotation or something, just like taking these metaphors literally kind of ruins the whole thing. Is that what you're saying?
I would have to dig into that a little bit more. I think I hear what you're saying, and I think I would want to say yes, but we would need to spell that out a little bit more.
Fair enough. Yeah, to me, like, once I started caring more about world mythology and whatnot, I realized that oftentimes, and art as well, that truth is oftentimes better expressed through metaphor and symbolism than just spitting out, this is how it is, didactic, polemical.
Streets of gold, to take that literally
Yeah.
rather than metaphor.
Yeah, metaphorically. And I think that you could see Christianity as a song, lyrics or something, where the meaning is deeper than the words on the page. That's just how I saw it. Maybe I'm wrong.
I would agree that that's a crucial element of Christian proclamation. I mean, when you look at, let's say, for example, Isaiah 65 from the Hebrew prophet Isaiah, or second Isaiah, third Isaiah, depending on what biblical scholar you're talking to. But it's this incredible picture of this coming day in which it says, for example, no mother shall bear a child for calamity, and every old man shall sit under his own vine and his own fig tree, and he shall not spend a life building a house that another inhabits. And he says, and God will wipe away every tear from every eye, and there will be new heavens and new earth. And the language is, we know it's poetry because of the way it's written, And it's a poetry that says something that's truer than true, right? The way we talk about fiction a lot of times. Fiction
Yeah.
says things oftentimes that are truer than true. And that's what is happening there. At the same time, there's this debate about, especially in the last 150 years in Christianity, about, let's say, for example, something like the resurrection of Christ, and whether or not that should be understood merely as a metaphor or as an expression of universal human experience. So, for example, one of the great Protestant liberals of the 20th century would say that the doctrine of resurrection is merely is a way of expressing that the experience of life after death or some sort of renewal after defeat is a universal human experience that we can enjoy. And then there are others, and I would be among them, who says, well, there's something about the proclamation of the resurrection of Christ that even though it cannot be comprehended by us, we nonetheless do believe in Christian orthodoxy that this is something that did happen in history. That even though we might not even necessarily know what that means, we do proclaim that there was some sort of resurrection of Christ. And so again, that it's depending upon what we're saying about poetic expression or metaphor or symbolism or so forth. And so many cases, obviously, that's what's going on is symbolism. And at the same time, there's a claim about historical moments, historical persons, that there was a King David, that there was the Hebrew prophets, that there was Jesus of Nazareth in the first century, that there was the Apostle Paul, that there was a crucifixion, a death, a burial, and a resurrection. These are still historical moments. They can still then be used symbolically to point to other things in addition. But so again, it gets quickly into a complicated sort of set of considerations about symbol and history and so forth. But I find all of those pretty exciting and enriching as a way of thinking about how we construe what we believe to be true.
Yeah, I really see. I'm so passionate about all of that because I just see art that way. Being able to express something truer than true through
Yeah.
like whether it's Jesus ascending bodily to heaven, like whether it's taken literally, like what does that mean?
Yeah.
That's where the gold is at. For
And
me.
and even the Apostle Paul in talking about the resurrection of Christ, he wants to insist there's a body, but even the way he talks about the body is still not quite the same as the body, obviously, that we have, because he describes it as a spiritual body. So it just gets complicated pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's in the inward space or whatever.
And not only that, but it's very old and in a completely different language that has been translated so many different times, the Bible as a whole. So even if we're talking about how we, am I taking it metaphorically or literally? Am I even reading the right translational word? You could say that one word means helper, and then other people would say it means partner. And somehow that's like, that makes a big difference. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or if you're reading, the parables of Jesus as hearing them as though you were a first century Jew, because rabbinical teaching, in the first century, the hearers would be hearing those parables very differently in ways that we, perhaps hear them now without, embracing or thinking about that context. I did want to say, I agree with everything Lee said about, Christianity's purpose in our moment, our culture, in whatever moment we find ourselves. Given that, I do believe those things as well. And given those beliefs, I always think about the Sermon on the Mount, like reading Jesus's words on the Sermon on the Mount. Those teachings are so incredibly radical and counterintuitive. And I always think about the Sermon on the Mount as Jesus saying, this is who you were created to be by the Creator, and this is who you will be again in the redemption of all things, in the eschaton. And given those glimpses, this is thus how you should strive to be an echo in the world. In other words, Christians, the purpose of Christianity is to be an echo or an ambassador or some kind of glimpses using kindness, art, music, sacrifice, uh, spiritual practices, all of those things that Jesus teaches in the Sermon on the Mount, uh, is those who ascend to the Christian narrative try their best, within what resources they have to be a reflection of his teachings. Not only does it not only is it is a inherently political exercise, and what the way I think about that versus the way like Christian nationalism thinks about is that it reframes power. It reframes the idea of power, whereas Christian nationalism says, seeks to grasp uh, a traditional view of power and use that power for the kingdom of God. The framing that Jesus gives in the Sermon on the Mount is a completely different way of saying and thinking about where power resides and what is true power. And that's why, beauty, not sacrifice, loving your enemy or walking a mile in their shoes, and praying for those who, like, all of those things reframe power in a way that uh, the nation state or institutional power thinks of our institutional states think about that power. And that's, to me, and again, this is why I keep trying to write these songs. This is why the song we wrote about these kind of things is, the end of the line of a long list of songs. And I've been trying to express about this because I find it so anti-Christian. I find that the idea that Christians would think about power in this way is so the opposite of how Jesus teaches, about where power resides.
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry, it was a long.
That's very well said. Thanks.
Kind of what That's kind of what Nietzsche was getting at in Antichrist, as in, the teachings have been changed. Of course, this is a different period in history. This is the 19th century when he's writing this, but many of the modern teachings are in direct contrast to the teachings that you're talking about.
Mhm.
So I was going to say, I thought we could talk for the last little bit about, maybe some of the issues I see with modern Christianity, and then give you a chance to talk about maybe how Aristotle and his idea of eudaimonia or happiness can help us get out of them. If that sounds, then we talk about
Sure.
never a little bit. So Heidi and I are doing this show that we do for PBS called Reconnecting Roots, where we rewrite these old songs, give them a new flair. We're doing an episode on houses, and we're doing this song, "Working on a Building." Do you know "Working on a Building"?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So the lyrics go, "I'm working on a building. It's a true foundation. I'm holding up the bloodstained banner for my Lord. I never get tired of working on the building, because when I'm done, I'm going to heaven to get my reward." And it's like this teaching I heard all the time growing up of the mansion in heaven. And so when I think about one of the issues with modern Christianity, it's on one hand, it's life denial, so it's a kind of like, I will endure this suffering on earth because one day in my afterlife, I will have a comfortable mansion or something. There's also a great song, "Mansion in Heaven."
Yeah.
My favorite version was Skaggs and Rice version of it. But, and then the other thing I was going to say is, in popular culture, we consume so many documentaries about, religion and cults. And so we watched, the one on Gwen Shamblin, who had the church in, was it Brentwood? It was
Yeah.
sweet.
Your neighbor, Brad.
Yeah. And so her gospel that she was preaching was basically, you have to be healthy.
Stay skinny for God.
And so a bunch of people were starving themselves to be a part of the congregation. And then we have the Duggars, who were on 19 Kids and Counting on TLC. It's like all these, like, and then Roy Moore, and we had the Spotlight story about the Catholic Church scandal. And it's like, in all of these situations, it's like the loudest voices that we hear from the Christians are often like scandals and whatnot. And I just find my issue is not just life denial. It's like, it seems like there's some sort of suppression of individuality that happens with Christianity, where these people, and a lot of times it's just part of being a victim of abuse that you don't naturally speak out. But I think it might be compounded with something with modern evangelical church, where in the Catholic Church too, where it just, victims are forced to conform, they lose their individuality. And so I've laid out the Nietzschean argument, and I would like to hear maybe how Aristotle can help us find happiness, or our pursuit of pleasure, or however you would like to respond.
Yeah. Yeah, boy, there's a lot there that we could unpack. And I think that I would kind of lay out there a few things kind of quickly, and then kind of come back. We can talk about whichever ones at length that we might want. As far as kind of like the life denial and the verse from the Working on a Building you're pointing to, I started laughing, thinking to myself, we've done Working on a Building 2 or 3 times on our show, on live shows, but we've never sung that verse that you pointed to.
With them in report.
Why, you don't like the blood-stained banner?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I especially don't like the escapism, right? That
Yeah.
And so, and we've done "I'll Fly Away" a few times on the show, but I always follow it up because it's a great bluegrass piece, right?
So good, yeah.
But I always snarkily comment that I always tell my students that "I'll Fly Away" is a Neoplatonic perversion of the gospel, and I think that's crucial to see, is that the life denial stuff, the escapism, the sharp dualism between spirit and body, between spirituality and materiality, that's all Neoplatonism, and the early church saw that as a heresy. But unfortunately, a lot of Christians these days believe a heretical form of Christianity that's much more indebted to Plato than it is, or Neoplatonists, than it is to either the Jews or the early Christians.
Yes.
And so we've got to keep hammering that over and over and over again. And then as far as the, what's at work in these sorts of horrific examples of oppression or abuse, I think there's lots of things at work. There's the thing Brad was pointing to a moment ago about a horrifically construed notion of power that gets played out. There's dynamics of shame that control people, that are devastating to people, and of course, Christians have done this, and secularists do it as well, right? So those are sort of universal, or at least very common experiences of oppression that you can find among almost any, I would say, any and every tradition, right? And that's not to excuse the Christians because everybody does it. It's to say Christians have fallen prey to these horrific practices as well. And then, of course, there's the reality of your question about, is there a sort of suppression of individualism? Is there something about Christianity that somehow inherently holds down, compresses, I can't find the word I'm quite looking for, individualism? And I would say that a couple of things there. One is that, going back to the comment we made earlier, referring to Tom Holland's book Dominion, and other historians who have said that the rise of classical political liberalism that gives rise to Western democracies is in many ways indebted to the Christian tradition. And so there's something in the Christian tradition that gave rise to this honoring of individuals. And part of the reason for that, at least part of the reason, a significant part of the reason, is that Christianity has insisted that there are to be no class distinctions and there are to be no one over the other based upon some marker of sex, some marker of economic viability, some marker of ethnicity, but we are all one. And so there's this radical acceptance of all people in the Christian tradition at its best. And that then in time is one of the currents that feeds Western political liberalism that celebrates individuals, right? At the same time, you also have that any community always, any and every community, it doesn't matter how conservative or how liberal in the American sense, every community has to have some form of dogma that gives that community coherence. And everybody has it, and they can deny they do, but they do, right? And so then the question becomes, well, how can you uphold certain basic commitments of the dogmas that allow your community to have coherence in such a way that are not oppressive, that can still honor individuality? And I think that can be done, but it's a tricky thing and it's a challenging thing and it's often very messy, but I do think that it can be done. So I think all of those kind of things would have to be unpacked to really even begin to give a sort of legit answer to your really great question. But those would be some of the things I'd want to start pointing to.
Yes. Okay.
I would love to hear what Brad thinks about some of that stuff about Western political liberalism, because he loves Thomas Jefferson so much.
Oh yeah. Sure. No. Well, the as we all know, the three things Jefferson had on his, had put on his tombstone was author of the Declaration of Independence, the founder of the University of Virginia, and the author of the Virginia Statute for Religious Liberties. It was the thing that was most important, but he really considered his greatest contribution to the American expression was the idea that the mind is completely incoercible, that and that it was the most sacred expression of American liberty, is that it neither picks my pocket or breaks my leg, as he says. If one man believes that 20 gods are none, and that is at the heart, the American expression of liberty, is the idea that the mind is not coercible and should never be subject to such.
And I'll throw in another quick historical allusion there, that you have at least the early 15th century and slightly earlier, you have people who began to argue for some sort of separation of church and state from a kind of a political philosophy perspective, because they're really ticked with the political power of the medieval church. But then there are also, in the 16th century, the so-called radical Protestant Reformation, who also sharply argue for the separation of church and state, but they're arguing for it not from political philosophy, but they're arguing from reading the Gospels. But it's similar to what Brad was just saying about Thomas Jefferson, is that if you were coercing people, you are by definition corrupting Christianity. And so they had such a commitment to the nonviolence of Christ that there's any sort of way in which you're allying state power and Christianity is from the start corrupting Christianity. And so that's their perspective on why to do this kind of separation of church and state.
That's fantastic. I love leaving it there. I'd love to hear, we got 1 minute left. If you could tell them a little bit about No Small Endeavor, and where to find it.
Yes. Yeah. So No Small Endeavor is our podcast and public radio show coming out of Nashville. You can find it wherever you listen to your podcasts, No Small Endeavor. And our tagline is exploring what it means to live a good life. And so my field is in Christian ethics, moral theology, but I bring that in conversation with not only theologians, but philosophers, social scientists, psychiatrists, psychologists, poets, occasional politicians, writers, all who are asking, what does it mean to live a good life? What is it like? What are the practices, the habits, the dispositions that facilitate living a good life? And it's been a treat. We get to talk to a lot of wonderful human beings. And so we would love for folks to come join us at No Small Endeavor.
That's awesome.
Man, I'm so glad we got to talk to you, got to catch up again. We talked about grabbing a beer, but it hasn't happened yet.
I
Yeah,
have
well,
one question though.
Oh, Heidi has one last question.
For my personal records, I was just wondering, have you ever seen a ghost?
You are so obsessed with ghosts, Heidi.
I cannot say that I have seen a ghost.
Okay,
I
that's
can
all.
say I've had a few mystical experiences, but I would not say that I've seen a ghost.
Okay, thank you. Thank
Was
you
that
very
your
much.
bombshell question then, Heidi? Was that
What?
that was your bombshell question?
Oh,
I was expecting more.
Not you well all the time because I need to know.
Yeah.
Mm.
Dillon will expect Jack to buy us a beer when we see him in London.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when we all
That
go to
was-
UK,
yes.
I'm
Yeah.
in Italy.
comes down.
Oh,
Yeah,
Italy.
Yeah.
Jack, I'm coming to Italy in about 6 or 7 months. So maybe I'll get a beer over there.
Okay, if you
Awesome.
come to the south,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. It means so much that you guys took the time
Yeah.
out of your day to Jack include us in your wonderful podcast. And Lee and Brad, I know you guys are busy, important guys, and we're very thankful for you and your time and your brains.
Thank you all.
That's
Very
true.
much enjoyed the conversation. Really appreciate the invitation. Thank you all.
Yeah, enjoyed being with.
Thank you. I'll stay on with the guys for a minute, just to debrief, decompress.
Very good.
Yeah.
Build
Thank
into
you,
the
guys.
song.
I did
Introduce the song.
I recorded this audio locally. If you want me to send you a WAV file of that, I don't know if you need it or want it.
That's
but I've got
that's no problem. No, it's I just
Mhm.
use the cloud recording.
Okay.
Mm.
Very good.
Thanks anyway.
Yes, sir.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you all. Thanks very much.
Thank you guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Well done, guys.
That was fun.
Thank you. Yeah. No, it's always interesting to I mean, this is the kind of conversation I want to have with, my family, but it's hard. It's hard to talk about these sorts of things when we sit on the other side of the fence. So
Yeah. It's actually a synchronicity that you asked to come on the show because I'm a member of a Christian group.
Oh, you are.
I am. Yes.
That's awesome. I would
It's
No.
quite, it is. Well, you wouldn't know. It's quite unusual, but maybe the stars are aligning. And
what was
Mhm.
what was your takeaway? I know it was largely focused on
America.
the evangelical church, but anything?
well, the Christianity's moved. There is no Christian country has moved to where long. I agree entirely. It's moved away from the teachings of Jesus. Tipping over the moneylenders' temple, tipping over the moneylenders' tables, and he was an incredible man. And as you talking about concepts which are out of copyright and which have been updated, so we have this 12 blessings. book.
Oh, interesting. The cosmic concept.
Yeah.
Sounds cool.
So it's 12blessings.org, 12 being numerical. And the society is called the Aetherius Society. And it was started by Dr. George King in the 1950s. And it's kind of taking the old concepts, but with a cosmic concept because Jesus was
Yeah.
a man who never went away, but he was, so he has a cosmic concept to it. And actually there's another book channeled by Dr. King called The Nine Freedoms, and the sixth freedom is ascension, which Jesus went through.
Huh.
It's interesting. It's like I started getting into world religion and stuff through Joseph Campbell, who was a professor of pathology at Sarah Lawrence College. And he talks about the importance of not throwing out the thing entirely, but just updating the metaphors. And that's kind of what I was getting at with Lee, although he does seem to still,
He rides with some of them.
he rides with some.
Mhm.
That's a good way to put it. But for me, it's like I think all the elements are there of something that works in modern society, but not the way it's been presented to us.
Yeah, that book Dominion really explains the benefits of what Jesus did first time around. And, we wouldn't have this society, this democratic society without those teachings. And yeah.
Right. That's kind of what the guys were saying.
It's interesting.
Yeah. So But now, there's this kind of cosmic concept now because you get the teachings for the times, no?
Yeah.
You guys maybe don't connect with the teachings because they're a bit out of date. They're a bit not modern. And so
Yeah.
Mhm.
We're probably, I mean, in the way we live our life is certainly not that different from, I think, what
What we were raised on,
what we were raised on.
family, be a good person, treat people how you'd like to be treated,
But
or better
ultimately, like,
even.
when we take those teachings as they were presented to us at face value, with our own adult understanding of them, it just makes us more socialist, more communist, taking care of people, making sure people have health care. And we grow, plants in our yard and hope to one day have a community garden. That's like our life goal. So, um, yeah, it's still in our life. It's just different.
Mhm.
Yeah, I joined it about 3 years ago, and it really kind of blew my mind because it connected everything together. Like Heidi was talking about ghosts.
Mhm.
So you talk about, where do you go when you die? And
Yes.
Mhm.
also UFOs, why don't you see them, and why are none of the other planets inhabited? And if they're not inhabited, why are they there? It's kind of
Yeah.
whereas, everywhere on the earth there's life, everywhere.
Mhm.
Like the highest mountain, the deepest ocean. And
Oh,
you
yeah.
don't so it's all about like that consciousness exists at different frequencies. So when you die, you have an astral body,
Mm.
like your aura, and you live at a different frequency, but right here
Hmm.
at the same. So ghosts can walk through walls, and because they're at just a different frequency. So when you die, you go to the other astral realms, which are just right here, but a different frequency.
Hmm.
And after ascension is the freedom of interplanetary existence, which is living on another planet at a different frequency, but right there, but you can't see them because we're on a very low frequency. So it's all about
Interesting.
Heidi loves the idea of ghosts and spirits.
I love the paranormal.
Yeah.
But I also love spirituality. I am an atheist, but I am very familiar with lots of different belief systems, and what I like to know all of my options. I've yet to hear one that, for me, I feel like no one, until you die, no one can know what happens. And so anyone who says, I know what happens in the afterlife, I'm immediately like, I don't know. And so that's where I get lost a lot in religion, because I like to know all my options, but I just have a hard time making a decision,
well, you can learn astral projection. So you can lie down and leave the physical body,
Huh.
project to the other realms.
So you like meditate?
Well, most
Like a
people
meditation?
you start out doing it with lucid dreaming, and then you go into gradually learn through that to do the projection while you're asleep. Because
Hmm.
when we sleep, you project. We all project when we sleep.
You lucid dream?
No, I don't know.
Hmm.
No.
I can sometimes. I was able to do it a bit when I would think about it during the day and tell myself, I am not asleep right now. If
Mhm.
I would just say it to myself lots of times, then when I would go to bed, maybe the 5 times it's happened, the thought would cross my mind, I am not asleep right now, because I'd said it so many times throughout the day. And then I would become aware of my dreams.
That's cool.
Yeah, I don't know. There's some books instructions about it, how to project. But then you go to the other realms. You go up or down. Each chakra is a realm of consciousness,
Hmm.
and so you leave the body, and then you go. So then you can, if you get advanced enough, you can. I've spoken to yogis who've been doing like mantra and pranayama since they were very young, and they have these abilities. So yeah, they can kind of tell you, and then when you hear anecdotally about it, it's a lot more like concrete and
That's
makes a
really
lot of-
interesting.
yeah.
That's cool. I didn't know that about you, Jack.
Well, I'm a man of mystery.
We've all got different interests.
I'll send you the files today.
Send me the song. It's quite important.
Yes.
I'll get the song.
It would be a
can
big
hear it now.
anticlimax at the end of the show.
Yeah, now you can hear it.
No, I'll send it to you today as soon as we get off here. So
Okay.
Thank you so much for having us. We got to have our friend come and work with us for the rest of the day. and then we're streaming again.
Yeah.
But I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thanks for including us. We're excited about our second one too.
Yes, back in November. So this episode will go out very quickly because as you guys have done it. Do you mind if because it's going to look a bit like Mount Rushmore with all four of you in the thumbnail. Do you
Yeah,
mind if I pick prominent people and put?
Oh,
Of
yeah,
course.
do whatever.
Yeah, you do what you want.
Okay.
Sure, show.
Come on.
Yeah.
I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
All right.
and
Have a great day.
All right. Take care,
Bye.
guys.
bye.
Bye bye.
Mother, Father, I've seen signs in the symbols of your faith. Gone are days of muscadine, nightmares follow like a wraith. Tears of sparrow brothers' blood laid a curse on holy ground. Buried boundless in the mud, for the joy of tainted crowns. Go down, Moses, lead the band, fill their mouths with desert sand, milk and honey in their hands, dreaming of candy, dreaming of Candyland. Children's sorrow hidden well, drowned out by a gospel song. Trouble stood behind the veil, lost in plain sight all alone. Go down, Moses, lead the band, fill their mouths with desert sand, milk and honey in their hands, dreaming of candy, dreaming of Candyland. Milk and honey running wild, raise your cane and join the band. Say farewell to freedom, child, welcome them to hungry mouths are full of sin. Raise your cane and join the band. Say farewell to freedom, child, welcome them to Candyland.
Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the song and the episode. The song will be released next week. It will be available on all streaming platforms, but you can already pre-save. Please support the artists by following them on social media and adding the song to any playlists you have. This is a completely free show, and you've listened this far, so I'd really appreciate it if you could pay us back by clicking like and subscribe. And follow at Podsongs on social media platforms, or subscribe to the newsletter at podsongs.com for special updates. Or just tell the next person you see about this amazing show where musicians interview their idols and write a song about them. The songs are available for download from the Podsongs website as well, which pays a lot more than the 0.00 whatever we get from Spotify. You can also email me at jack@podsongs.com to give feedback, suggest an artist and guest combos you'd like to hear, or just say hello. We're a listener-supported show, and I'd love to hear from you. A final thanks to my researchers, Dori Verbo and Rosa Marino, my producer, Maurizio Sanicola of Goldmine Records, and musicians Massimino Vozza and Luigi Falcione. The next episode will be out soon. In the meantime, you can listen to more amazing episodes in the archives. Until then, have a great day.